Okay, guys, today we're going to talk a little bit about the beginning of this idea of polynomials. And this section, some of the terminology may be something you've not heard of before, so this will kind of be a new piece for us to work through. So first of all, a polynomial is a single term or a sum of two or more terms with whole number powers. So that basically means kind of a couple things. That means that you're going to have at least one term or more. And if it's more, that's because they either have a plus between two things or they might have a minus between two things. Now, when they talk about this piece right here with whole number powers, that basically means that all of the exponents that you're going to see, and these are, first of all, with variables. So they are the exponents that are going to go on the variable one. They have to be whole numbers. So that means that there are going to be no negative values, so no negative exponents, or no fractions. You got to make sure they're whole number values. Okay, now you'll notice on the side there is a little bit of vocabulary over here that's about some of that information that we talked about the other day. The coefficient, it says it's the number value of the term. Remember, the coefficient was the number in front of the variable. So if I had 2x, the coefficient would be the 2 part. The constant term is a term that contains only a number. So if I had something like x plus 7, this part right here would be the constant. Okay, so that part of the vocabulary you should remember from the other day. Now this one says, tell whether each expression is a polynomial and explain your reasoning. So remember, we have two things that we have to stay away from. If it's going to be a polynomial, there can't be any negative exponents or any fractions that are exponents. And we also have to make sure that we remember that it's got to have whole numbers for the exponents. So on A, it's 3x to the negative 2 minus 5. And I can see right there that's going to be a problem. So this is not a polynomial. Because you can't have any negative exponents. Okay, and I'm trying to just abbreviate so I can fit in here each of these pieces, but I want you to kind of get the idea of how it's set up. Now the next one is 6x plus 4x squared. So first of all, I can see one exponent that's here. Is that 2? That's a whole number, no problem. With the x, there's no number that's there. And remember, like we said before, if there's no value there, you assume there's a 1. So you have 1 and 2 as your exponents, so both whole numbers. So yes, it is a polynomial. Okay, now on C, it's 15. Do you notice how there's no x there at all? So you could almost kind of pretend that it has x to the 0, because that would be like having no x's. Either way that you look at it, whether you have one here or not, this one is going to be a polynomial. Okay, no negative exponents, no fraction values. Okay, the next one is 2 plus x to the 1/2. So there's our issue right there. I have an exponent that's a fraction. So this is not a polynomial because you cannot have, there are no fraction values for the exponent. Now, one other one I want to point out that you might see would be something like this. And that one, it's also a problem if it were on the bottom. Because if I were to move this, remember, like we talked about negative exponents, that would go on the top. That would be like this. So if it's on the bottom, it's kind of like having a negative exponent. So this is not a polynomial. Okay, so those are some basic ideas about polynomial. Okay, now for a minute, let's talk about standard form. Standard form is when you take your polynomials when you're writing them, and they have to go in order from the highest exponent to the lowest. So basically for most of these, it's all about rearranging correctly. Okay, so if I look at this first one, I have 3x squared minus 5x to the third. So I'm going to kind of pretend like there's one term and there's the second. So the highest exponent I have is x to the third. So when I rewrite it in standard form, that's going to go first. Then I have that 3x squared, and I assume that 3 is positive. So I'm going to write plus 3x squared. So I rewrote it with the highest exponent down to the lowest. Okay, let's add a few more pieces. So I'm going to go through right now. Look at each of these terms here. Those are all kind of my separate terms. But before we do anything, do you notice that those two right there are the same variable? So if I have 7x to the third and 22x to the third, that means it's going to be 29x to the third. And then I'm going to bring down the rest of the problem. Just trying to get it put together. Okay, now I'm going to look at each term. So the highest exponent would be this one right here of x to the fourth. So negative 6x to the fourth. Now, did you guys notice I brought the negative with me from right here? So make sure you take the sign in front of it, especially if it's negative. Okay. Next highest would be x to the third, and that 29 I assume is positive. So I'm going to write plus 29x to the third. And then this one is last. So minus 3x squared. Oop, might help if I put my exponent there, huh? Okay, so do you get the idea of rearranging? Okay, take a look at this last one. So if I look at this last one, I'm going to kind of separate my terms so I can look at them. None of them are alike. Okay, this is my highest exponent, so that's going to be written first. The next highest is going to be 3. X squared would be the next, and I assume that's a positive 5x. So I'm going to do plus 5x squared, and then minus 11 is the end. Okay. Okay, make sure you go over if you need to watch that video again from yesterday so you can make sure you're good with kind of the basic vocabulary here.